rule with him and co-rule and co-reign with him from the wood. So those trees of the field, in Isaiah it says the trees of the field will clap their hands. Okay, because they received the atonement of the wood and the righteousness from the wood. So again, this message, Yahuwah rules from the wood. So verse 10, he rules from the cross, the tree of sacrifice, the execution stake. So let the earth be full of simcha. Let the Shemayim rejoice and have Gilah. And now watch. Let the wood Gilah before Yahuwah, for he comes. Notice, that's the second coming, verse 13. No wonder the rabbis took this out of the text. Yes? No wonder they took this out of the text. You won't find this in the messy text, in the Masoretic text, or the Textus Receptus, which is basically Erasmus doing the same thing to the Greek manuscripts that the rabbis did to the Old Testament. Erasmus compiled them and copy and pasted the best of what he thought was the best, just like the Jews redacted the original Hebrew of the Septuagint and the Septuagint itself, because they didn't have the Hebrew. They just burned the Hebrew, and then they were only left with the Septuagint, which they doctored. Okay, but this was in the original scriptures. Watch this. He rules from the wood. So let the earth be glad. Let the sea roar. Let the heavens rejoice. Let the trees of the field, that's believers, the other pieces of wood, the trees of righteousness, also Gilah, have great rejoicing before Yahuwah, because he comes. See? So the one who dies on the wood rules and reigns from the wood, but then again he's coming again, and we are to rejoice and anticipate his second coming. Isn't that neat? Isn't that neat? So this is a clear, beautiful messianic psalm, messianic prophecy, that once we understand what happened on the tree of sacrifice, the execution stake of our master Yahushua, when we understand that Yah forbid that we should glory in anything but the execution stake of our master Yeshua, by whom the world is crucified unto us, and we unto it. So we don't rejoice in anything. We have Gilah along with the sea and the heavens and the earth, because Yahuwah doesn't rule from a basement or a prayer tower in Oklahoma, or from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Yahuwah rules from the wood. See? And so that gives new meaning to this festival of wood, because the three festivals in the middle of our life, once we get saved, they're like in the middle of our life. What keeps us walking with Yeshua? The wine, that's the blood. The oil, that's the ruach. And the wood, that's where it all took place. He died on the wood, and he came to rule our lives when we accepted the wood, yes? When we accepted the finished work on the wood. When we accept the sacrifice, the atonement on the wood. And then we receive the wine that comes from the wood. Where does the oil come from? Yeshua said, receive the oil and the ruach. Receive the ruach. So all that comes from the one who rules our lives from the wood. So we appointed him ruler of our lives, not from the Taj Mahal, or not from 10 Downing Street, or not because he lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We appointed him the ruler of our life and the master of our life because he rules from the wood. All this is missing. This key verse, verse 10. But it was found among the Zadokites. The Zadokite priests, the same ones who kept the true Shabbat, who guarded the calendar in times of Enoch and angels and Yahuwah that is celebrated in the heaven. People think, oh, Yahuwah doesn't celebrate holidays. He sure does. It says he rested and was refreshed. Shabbat v'inafash. So he not only instituted the first Shabbat, he himself kept Shabbat. He rested. So this idea is, oh, we're not under the law. We don't have to follow the law because we're not Jews. And we have our own holidays. And Christ gave us different holidays. Or there's no difference between, he knows our heart. That's a lie. Yahuwah established the first Shabbat because he himself kept it. And he himself kept the first Passover. Okay? Because when he saw the blood on the doorposts of the homes in Mitzrayim, he himself didn't allow Melech HaMavet, or the angel of death, to come, or as the book of Jubilees calls him, Mastama. He did not allow Lucifer, Satan, Mastama, to kill anyone in a home, in a Hebraic home, because Yahweh said, when I see the blood, I will myself commit a Passover. I will conduct a Passover. So he doesn't ask us to do anything that he himself doesn't do, because he's not a hypocrite. He's not an actor like most of the politicians in the theater of the absurd. They're great actors. They're the best. That's why when they give a speech, great speech. Well, what did he say? I don't know. But it was a great speech. Is anything going to change? It never does, because they have no authority and power to change it unless it comes from above. But it was a wonderful performance. Great speech. You'll notice that's how they rate politics. Great speech. It's always about the speech. That's theater. That's oratory. That's why so many Hebrews are sucked up into the deception of the stupid synagogue of Satan, teaching that the Jews are the synagogue of Satan. Because the people doing that teaching have great oratory skills with a twang of an English accent. And all Americans know that the real English, originally spoken by Washington and Franklin and James Madison, was in English, a London English, not an Americanized English. Okay? So we get impressed with oratory rather than is what's being said from the tree, from the wood. So again, this message, as we celebrate, many of you for the first time in your life, celebrating the Feast of Wood. Either you're new to Hebraic roots, or you've been Messianic for 20, 30 years, but no one's ever told you about the three missing feasts. New wine, new oil, and the Feast of Wood, right in the middle of the year, where Yahweh said they would be in Exodus 34, I believe it's 22. I'll have to look it up. In the Septuagint, okay? And so it's the 6th month. Last time I checked, that was right in the middle of the year. Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. So those who recognize his sovereignty as the one who rules through the righteous trees, who rejoice with the sea, with the heavens, because they don't just see a Jewish rabbi who died on a stick. They see the eternal atonement and provision for mankind, which was the only way back to Eden. It was the only way back to the king. It was the only way back to the master. It was the only way that those who had become enemies can be restored to friendship with Yahweh. Okay? And he's coming back. Look at 13. The same psalm prophesies of his return. He's coming to judge the earth. See? That's why first time he came to redeem those who would be redeemed. Second time he's coming to judge the earth, who don't want to make teshuvah and be redeemed. Verse 13, we're reading from Tehillim 96. He will judge the olam with tzedakah. Why? Because he is what? Melech Sadok, or he is the king of all righteousness. And he will judge the people of the world not with man-made laws, okay, but with his emet. There's a word that I wanted to use for the man-made laws. Statutes, okay, man-made statutes. But he will not use that measuring stick. He will use truth, which is, what is truth? Thy word is truth. 119, your Torah is truth. So the word is truth, Torah is truth, Yeshua is truth, Yeshua is the living Torah, Torah viviente, and he is the living word. They're all the same thing. But all this revelation, all this judging, all this power, all this authority, all the righteousness and truth with which he will enact kingdom rulership over this earth, Okay? All that comes from the one ruling and reigning from the wood. And again, you will only find this restored from the Septuagint and the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Restoration Scriptures. Okay? And you can get your copy online now. We're entering a new age, a new era, I should say, of printing at lower cost with perfect binding. Even though it's perfect glued soft cover, it should last you 10, 15 years. Okay? At almost half the cost. So let's see everybody get on board and think about becoming a distributor, getting 5, 6, 10, and really being an ambassador for the kingdom. It's one thing to sell tzitzit or to sell messianic jewelry, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But messianic jewelry or tzitzit very rarely get anybody saved. But when we distribute the scriptures, we're sowing the seed into people's hearts and lives. I know one friend of mine a long time ago, and he said, "I'll never believe your garbage, I'll never believe your garbage." And I kept negotiating with him, and I finally negotiated out a deal where I would pay him, I don't know what it was, $30, $40, if he promised to read the Gospel of Matthew. He read the Gospel of Matthew, the seed took deep root, and today he's a believer. And then his whole family came to believe, an entire Jewish family, matter of fact, from New York City. All because I paid him. I gave him the dare. I gave him a challenge. I said, "I'll give you need $40 to fix your car." You know, he was a young man at that time. He didn't have a lot of money. And I said, on one condition, that you read the Gospel of Matthew, because I knew what would happen. And it did happen. See? So that's the best investment we can make. So I'd like to see those who understand what I'm saying. When you place your next order, please make sure that you get a whole bunch and begin to take advantage of the fact that we have lowered the cost, which is basically the only way we can continue. So anyway, those who trust the sovereignty and the rulership of Yeshua HaMashiach are the ones who will enjoy his return when he returns not to die as the lamb, but as a lion of the tribe of Judah, Revelation chapter 5, verse 5, and to enact his government, his righteousness, based on Zadokite, because he is the king of right, or all that is right, or ever has been. The world and the universe is so full of wrong and evil and misdirection, which is sin, missing the mark of perfection, missing the mark of perfection. That's what sin is. The Torah is the mark of perfection. Missing the mark of perfection. And so we need his Zadokite that he's coming with, and the truth that he's coming with to use to judge the world. And all this is from the wood. See, when you tell the world that our Savior rules from the wood, or metaphorically based on what he provided for us and what he did for us on the wood. You follow me? He's not there on the wood like the Roman Catholic Church teaches. Like, oh, there he is. You know, when I first got saved, I didn't know where to get discipled. I looked in the yellow pages and I found St. Paul's Church. I go, well, there's a church near my house. And then it was a Roman Catholic. I said, well, let me make an appointment. And I made an appointment with Father Fox. And then he told me that I needed a godfather. So I was a Jewish boy. Things were not clicking too well. Why would I need a godfather? What's a godfather? Is in the mafia. I don't know. I was a brand new baby. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And so they got a Hispanic guy who was like half my age. I think he was in kindergarten. Man, maybe he was in junior high school. And I think his name was Luis or Luis. I forgot. So he became my godfather. He said, well, if you don't have anybody in your family that's a good Catholic, we can provide a godfather for you. Can you imagine Shaliach Moshe Yosef Kanichowski going to a Catholic church and having a godfather assigned because they don't have one? Poor Jewish boy doesn't have a godfather. So no. Father Fox is going to appoint a godfather from Moshe Yosef Kanyuchovsky. So I had, he must have been about, I don't know if he was in middle school or junior high school, I don't know, it was crazy. So he says, "Hi, I'm your godfather." I said, "Hi." He says, "Yeah, you see Jesus?" I said, "Where?" I said, "You mean he's in my heart?" No, over there." I said, "Where?" Because it was dark in the Catholic Church, all the lights were out, it was during the week. Nobody was sitting behind the screen. Nobody was practicing popery. It wasn't their day to practice. It was one of the days when they were not practicing popery. So I looked, the whole room was dark, I couldn't find Jesus. Then my young godfather said, "Look, there's Jesus." I said, "Where? I don't see him." "He's over there on the cross." I go, "Oh, you mean the plastic?" "Yeah, but he's not plastic. That's where he is." I said, "Oh, what do you mean? You telling me that's where Jesus?" He says, "Yeah, because he's right behind the plastic. The plastic represents Jesus, just like the beads represent Mary. It's not really Mary, but you need the beads to contact his mother." So all kind of, I never fell into practicing popery, okay? As a matter of fact, because of that experience, whenever it came time to clean my carpet, I never bought popery. I bought some other kind of brand, like Armor All, or not Armor All, but some other kind of carpet cleaner, because the practice of popery left a bad taste in my mouth. So then I came to realize that there was a counterfeit Jesus who was plastic. I mean, he was on a cross, but the problem was he hasn't been on a cross for 2,000 years. But there was a lesson there that he rules from the wood, meaning based on the principles and doctrines. Finished work, categorical doctrine. His finished work based on his complete and total finished work for our pardon and for our sins. That he really does rule from the cross, even though he hasn't been there for 2,000 years. That's one of the mysteries of the faith. That's one of the powerful revelations and mystery of the faith. So the Catholics don't have it right, but if they just took the plastic Jesus out of the picture. So think about a almighty, omnipotent ruler who's ruling and reigning the whole world and conducting all the events, guiding the cosmos, the sun, the stars, and the moon. They're all subject to his command. And he's doing it through the authority that he showed us, the authority that produced righteousness and truth and hope and resurrection and eternal life. So he completely took over the world. He completely overcame the world through the wood. And today we're celebrating the Feast of Wood. Then it all began to make sense. The three feasts that most talk about the finished work of Yeshua, the proof that Yahweh decided to rule and reign and offer the kingdom to men from the wood, that offer, okay? Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Okay? So he prayed as Kohen HaGadol for our forgiveness because we were all stupid when it came to who that was and why he was doing what he was doing. So he forgave us all that day. Anybody who would come to recognize that Yahuwah doesn't reign from a prayer tower in Oklahoma or from a church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or from the Potter's house in Dallas, Texas. That he reigns, all his authority was manifested to humanity based on the wood. So that's what the Feast of Wood is all about. We've taught about this in the past. Go to our YouTube channel and begin to study. Please, go to our YouTube channel and begin to study. We taught intensely on the Feast of New Wine. We know that's what? The blood. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. Because almost all things are purged by blood. Then, of course, the Feast of New Oil, which we just celebrated 2 days ago, on Yom Echad. That is the spirit that only Yeshua gives. The Jews, the Catholics, the Protestants. Nobody can get the spirit unless they first acknowledge that Yahuwah has chosen the offer of salvation and the authority of that offer coming from heaven to the wood so that he would rule in the affairs of men and the hearts of men through the wood. You see? And so the new oil was the precious empowerment which we get at salvation. Every believer gets a portion of the Ruach at salvation. But they get a full empowering or a subsequent endowment or powering by constantly being filled with oil. Be ye filled. That's in the Greek. It's a present aorist, present tense, meaning a constant repeating action. It's not a one-time action. It's a constantly repeating action. Be ye continually needy and calling on the Ruach, and be not drunk with wine wherein is excess. Ephesians 5. So, no wonder the rabbinic, the Talmudists, okay, they're not Bolsheviks, they're not Edomites, they're not Kaisers. That's stupid. Go review the teaching from last week. Whatever, they're just deceived religious leaders, just like any other deceived religious leader. They don't run the world, they don't control the world, they don't control the banks, they don't control your every breath of your life. They're all anti-Semitic lies. They're just a bunch of deceived leaders who had a lot of authority, and they misused that authority. Just like the leaders of the Watchtower or Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay? We cannot demonize an entire group of people and even admit that we're stereotyping them with a broad brush. Like Dr. King said, we are to judge wicked blacks by their character. So if they're black and they're wicked, don't matter. Just because they're black, I'm not going to be politically correct and say they're not wicked. Same with white folks. Dr. King appealed to us to judge men by the fruit or lack thereof of their character. And so we who are governed by the wood, Yahuwah rules from the wood. Do you understand why this verse is missing from the Masoretic text? Rivka, please keep the office door closed. Do you now also understand? Do you also understand why the festival of wine, oil, and wood are not celebrated anywhere in Judaism? Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, Messianic, Hebrew roots, Black Israelite, White Israelite, Polka Dotted Israelite, Parachute Israelite, Helicopter Israelites, Indianapolis Motor Speedway Israelites. No one celebrates this except the Zadokites, the Kohanim, and the heavenly priests who are the Kohanim, so that heaven and earth is in one accord. The way the world is today, with the religious leaders misleading our people, earth is in their own accordion, and heaven cannot be in accord with the earth, because the earth is too busy being in an accordion. Yahuwah doesn't want the earth to be separate in an accordion, in a musical accordion. They want it to be in accord with the heavenly Melachim. So that when we do get together for these feasts and the true Shabbat, we're joining the Kehillah, the community in heaven of Melachim and of righteous men made perfect. Like Enoch, righteous men made perfect. Like possibly Eliyahu. See? Because Yahuwah has determined the way to join the heavenly priests, which are the Melachim. They're not just messengers, the angels. They're not just messengers, they're priests. That the way to join the pre-existing company of these messenger priests is through the wood. Yahuwah rules, Psalm 96, verse 10. Where is it? Where can you find it? Write it down. Tehillim 96:10. Yahuwah rules, offers rulership, power, and authority from the wood. You're not going to find it in a drive-thru. You're not going to find the offer on Amazon. He has offered it, and now you have accepted it. So there are no excuses. Well, I can't keep the real Shabbat because I work. Stop the excuses. Get into alignment with heaven. Get out of the accordion and come into one accord with the Shamayim. Not interested in the excuses. I don't have respect for people. I have respect for people who are working their way out of excuses into obedience. They may not be in obedience yet, but they're working hard and quickly. They're not postponing, because postponed obedience is disobedience. Never forget that. Well, one day I plan on being obedient. Postponed obedience equals, igual to disobedience. It's the same exact thing. Look at the life of Abraham Avinu. The call came. Immediately he left Ur Chasdim, Ur of the Chaldees. Not a week later, not a month later, he left and never went back. Once you're planted, you don't go back. Once you know to do good and do it not immediately, to you it is sin. Just because you know Yahuwah's will doesn't mean you're not sinning. Once you know his will, once you know his purpose, once you know his calling, once you know what is required of thee, O man, obedience must be immediate, because delayed obedience is disobedience. Never forget that. So I don't have respect for people who can give me a whole litany of excuses. Well, I go to school, and I go to beauty school, and I go to massage school, and then I got to take my... Give it to someone else. Where did he get that terrible habit from? That's disgusting. Anyway, I'm entitled to one vice, right? You have a few? You have a few. So I'm entitled to one. You can't be playing games with... Because he rules from the wood. From the wood comes righteousness for you as a gift, a free gift of pardon. But in return, you're expected to respond to the truth. So if Shabbat really is 3 days after day 4, and every once in a while when Satan attacks, I got to remind myself that we're not a cult. You got to remind yourself, those of you who follow our teaching. And how do you remind yourself that you didn't invent the Shabbat? Because let me tell you something. If what we're doing now is not Shabbat, then you know who's to blame, which is the first time. Because when we were doing Lunar Shabbat and other things, we were to blame because we had not seen the full picture, and only Yahuwah saw the full picture. So we were to blame. But if we got it wrong this time, like when Satan attacks you and says, well, you know, Saturday is really the Shabbat. This whole thing that they're doing in the community is wrong. The Zadokites, the entire priesthood, from the temple in Yeshua's time and that later went into Qumran, all kept this calendar. This calendar was not invented by me, by man, and by others. There was a major sect of first century Judaism, which was the priestly version, which used to govern the temple before it had become corrupted after the Hasmonean dynasty. This is what they did. This is exactly what they did. And let's assume that this is all wrong, that the Shabbat and everything we're doing is wrong. It's based on what a large segment of the Jewish community at Yeshua's time practiced. And he never rebuked them, did he? Hello? Matter of fact, he died on their schedule, didn't he? He celebrated Passover on the third day. Look it up. Look up your angelic Enochian Zadokite calendar. Passover can never fall on any other day other than the third day of the week. He eats Passover on the third day of the week. He dies on the fourth day of the week and rises after Aviv 18, which is the third Shabbat of every year. The third Shabbat of every year. The first Shabbat is Aviv 4. The second Shabbat is Aviv 11. The third Shabbat of every year is Aviv 18, which in Hebrew means life. Some of you wear 18 around your neck. It's called a Chai. Chet Yud, 18. Life. He rises right on after the Shabbat of life. So he was keeping the very fact that he celebrated Passover, not the Lord's Supper, not the crackers, not Polywana cracker, not the Memorial Supper, and all this church, Messianic, Hebraic roots garbage. He's not a liar. Your teacher's a liar, but he's not a liar. He said it was a Passover. And he said, I'm going to eat the Passover with you in a large upper room furnished. He also said that the man bearing the pitcher of water, which what the Zadokites did, they always carried water so they can do the ceremonial cleansing quickly in case they were underway or they were in the way or they were somewhere where they couldn't do a quick cleansing. So they always carried water. The man carrying the water was a Zadokite priest who would show you a large upper room. He joins the Zadokite family on the third day, not Tuesday night, not Tuesday, take that out of your head. On the third day at night, and then dies on the Jewish preparation day when they were preparing the lambs, because they're the ones who falsely betrayed him and gave him to the Romans to be killed. So the actions of Yeshua during the Passion Week mirror the calendar of Qumran. So I'm gladly willing to be wrong this time. We've been wrong, but anybody that wants to understand the true time of Yahweh has to do so much digging through many clouds of confusion that you're going to fall on your face a few times, and everybody quits right before the finish line. Now we cross the finish line in terms of understanding the true Shabbat. So if we're wrong, the priests are wrong. An entire large segment of the Jewish community in the first century was wrong, and angels are, and heavenly, and Yahweh himself is wrong because he rested on the third day after he assigned the sun, the moon, and the stars. He assigned it on day 4. You can't have weeks and days until you get the assignment. A child can go to school and just sit in his class and cannot get any work done until the teacher gives him his assignment. The school is there, his lunch is there, his pencil is there, the student is there, but he's not functioning until he gets his assignment. If he gets his assignment and then the teacher says, now I want this assignment turned in 3 days, 3 days later, he's going to turn in the assignment. That's what happened with the Shabbat. We cannot be wrong. Because if we're wrong, the Torah is wrong. So next time the devil comes to you and says, oh, this, I don't know. Sometimes I'm tempted to think that maybe Saturday was right. Maybe we're being misled. I'm feeling weird. I'm feeling funky. Because the enemy is going to attack all of us who are busy obeying Yahweh. He's going to attack us that way. You have to know what you know that you know that you know that you know, based on Torah, based on history, and based on the actions of Yeshua. When did he celebrate Passover? The Jews who follow the solar lunar calendar, going back all the way back to the days of Yeshua, never celebrated Passover on day 3. Sometimes it was day 4, sometimes Passover was on day 6, sometimes it floated, right? Right? Just like today on the Jewish calendar. Sometimes Passover is on a Saturday. Now you're really in trouble. You can't cook, but it's Passover. So the rabbis had to make up a religion. They postpone holidays when it don't fit, see? Rather than humbling themselves and changing their understanding, they take it upon themselves to change laws. But if we follow Yahuwah's time, Passover can never be on a Shabbat. Rosh Chodesh, the new month, can never be on a Shabbat. All these days, and the Feast of Trumpets will always fall on the 4th day of the week. The Yom Kippur will always fall on the 6th day of the week. Any year and every year till eternity, including through the kingdom. They can never require a fire or this or that and contradict the Shabbat. So, this is what happens when we submit our lives to the one who rules and reigns from the wood. So these 3 feasts, each of these 3 feasts in the tomb, 1 day, 1 night, 2 nights after the 3rd night. So each of these feasts represent a full day and a full night. And isn't it interesting? One of those weird rabbinic, Talmudic, religious coincidences that these 3 are missing. Okay? If they had their way, they would take out Pesach too. Trust me. And they kind of have. To hide Yeshua's love and finished work that he offers, his sovereignty that proceeds to the nations from the wood, that the heavens are to rejoice, that the seas are to roar, that the trees of the field are to clap their hands, based on what happens in his rulership from the wood. So during these 6 days, now we have 6 days of the Feast of Wood because each day represents 1,000 years of where where man is in his own rule, except for the men who have given their lives to the one who rules from the wood. Think about that while I sit. You ought to be sharing this broadcast with somebody instead of just sitting there. If this is the Word, and we're sowing the Word, we're all called to be sowers of the Word. As they say in Yiddish, geschmack. It's not a bad word. Sounds like a bad word in English, but in Hebrew, in Yiddish, it's good and tasty. So, you don't find these 3 messianic feasts because, claro, they are pinpointedly lifting up and promoting Yahuwah's rule and authority from the wood. So there are 6 days of wood, because there are 6,000 years from the first Adam's fall to the rulership of the second Adam, when he rules and reigns for Shabbat, the 7,000th year. There'll be 1,000 years, we call it in Hebrew, Yom Shekulo Shabbat. Okay? Yom Shekulo Shabbat. For 1,000 years, it is a day. A day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. A day that is only Shabbat. See? So, let's get this straight. The wood speaks about the authority of Yahuwah and the finished work of Messiah for our sins and for our transgressions. He offers the wood to us for 6 days, meaning 6,000 years, so we can enter the eternal Shabbat rest of the Messiah. Now, in return, he requires Israel to offer him wood for 6 days. Isn't that interesting? If we receive his understanding, sus pensamientos, then when we restore the Feast of Wood in our life, because we receive our authority and our instructions from the wood, we return to him a wood offering for 6 days. Now, the way it was originally set up was there were 12 tribes, so the Kohanim, in that case, the Zadokim, so we know it was right, the Zadokites, would bring the wood to the house of Yahuwah for 6 days, and every day it would be 2 tribes. Remember Yeshua sent out the message of the wood? Remember when Yeshua sent out the message of the wood? How did he send it out initially? 2 by 2. How did Yeshua send out the message of the wood? 2 by 2. For 6 days, 2 tribes would bring forth the message of the wood. But here they would be offering it to Yahuwah, saying, we recognize that the offering of the wood, the message of the wood, of Yeshua's finished work, is offered to all 12 tribes of Israel for 6,000 years, 6 days. The Feast of Wood lasts for 6 days. And notice, in here, I don't know if you can see it, you probably have your own calendar. It starts right here on the first day of the week. This is the 23rd day of the 6th month, right here. And it goes on for 6 days. And when does it end? And what happens after the 6 days? What happens after 6,000 years? We have the Messianic kingdom. And when is the day after? Or when does the Feast of Wood end? On the Shabbat, meaning after the 6 days are complete at sunset. Okay, we have 6 days complete. At sunset begins what? Begins what? The 7th day, or the millennial kingdom. So it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful picture of the coming kingdom. And then you see in verse 13 of Psalm 96. Let's go back. Yahuwah is coming. Who's coming? Yahuwah is coming. Well, does that mean that the guy on the wood was Yahuwah? Well, he said in Corinthians, he said the Jews will not believe without a sign. So what did Yahuwah do? He put up a sign. And what did the sign say? What did the sign say? Yeshua HaMoshiach Ve'melech HaYehudim. Or the acronym Yud He Vav He. Yeshua, Yahuwah, the tetragrammaton. Yud He Vav He. So he says the Jews will not believe without a sign that Yahuwah could possibly redeem Israel from the Romans, from the Greeks, from the Babylonians, from the Medo-Persians, that redemption would come from the authority of the wood. Israel wouldn't believe without a sign. Keep your finger there. I didn't plan any of this. I apologize. Yahuwah always teaches and shares what he pours into our hearts. Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. I say Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. And I don't even know where it is, but I'm going to take a chance. Oh, here we go. I brached out. We don't believe in lucking out. We believe in braching out. Corinthia Aleph, or 1 Corinthians, chapter 1. 1 Corinthians, chapter 1. Let's pick it up here in verse 21. For after Chokhmah, the Chokhmah, or the wisdom of Yahuwah, came into the Olam Hazeh, by worldly Chokhmah, the world knew not Yahuwah. So it pleased Yahuwah by the simplicity of proclaiming. It's a simple message. He rules in righteousness and truth based on what he did through his Son, as Yahuwah come in the flesh, his own flesh, at the wood. See? It's the simplicity of a proclamation. Can anything be more simple? The religion came in and confused it. Okay? Pre-millennial rapture, mid-tribulation rapture, post-tribulation, all this confusion. The simplicity of proclaiming is what saves those who believe. Verse 22, 1 Corinthians 1:22. For the Yahudim, or the Judites, or the Jews, require a sign, and the Greeks require or seek after chokhmah, wisdom. But we proclaim Mashiach on the wood, impaled, crucified. We proclaim Mashiach from the wood, not from the tower, not from a kingly palace, not dressed in beautiful clothing. We proclaim a Messiah who died on the wood, to the Yehudim a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. But to those who are both Yehudim or Greeks, who understand that Yahuwah rules from the wood, the Moshiach from the wood becomes the power and becomes the wisdom of Yahuwah. It becomes the power, that wooden sacrifice when he died on the wood. When we understand it, Jews and non-Jews, Jewish and non-Jewish Israel, when the remnant of both houses, Romans 11:5, accepts the Messiah, they become part of the olive tree, and now the simplicity gives us power and wisdom. The simplicity of what was proclaimed to us gives us power, but also gives us wisdom to understand that in its simplicity, therein lies the power. I'll say that again. In its simplicity, therein lies the power. And so it says that the Yehudim require a sign. Okay, so did Yahweh knew that the Jews required a sign? Absolutely. because the Jewish people betrayed him to the Gentiles, right? The Romans killed him. So what did Yahweh do? He put up a sign. What did the sons of darkness cry? Take down that sign. These are the folks who were the blind leaders. Not because they were Edomites, Kaisers, or bacon heads or cheese heads. Not because they ate at Chuck E. Cheese. The reason they were evil and sons of the devil was because they were blind, not because they were Jews. Because they were blind, not because they were Jews. Because they were blind, not because they were Jews. Because they were blind! So Yahuwah rules from the wood. And he's coming back. Apart from sin. Unto deliverance. For those who are watching. Look up. Look up. Away from the wood now. Because your redemption is coming from there. Your first redemption came from the wood. The redemption of your being, of your spirit. But now Yeshua said in the second coming, "O you trees of wood, you trees of righteousness, join the sea and the Shamayim, Gilah with the sea and the Shamayim, and look up, because your redemption draws nigh." The Feast of Wood is the third of the lost feasts. We sacrifice, as I said, in a new and living way on the Feast of Wood. Outside the camp, notice, where did Yeshua cause us to begin to receive what was being offered to us on the wood? Outside the religious community, outside the sons of darkness, outside the blind leadership. That's why he set up a separate altar where the wood of atonement, the blood of atonement, the oil that would proceed forth from that sacrifice was outside the camp. And Hebrews talks about that, I believe, in chapter 13. Does it not? Where it says, let us, meaning those who realize Yahuwah establishes his authority in our lives from the wood, let us go outside the camp bearing the same reproach that Messiah did. So he built his altar outside the camp, okay? And we've done a lot of teaching on this. I suggest you go on the YouTube channel. Maybe I'll do it again sometime soon. He died on the Mount of Olives because there he began to spill his blood, great drops. There he was crushed in the Garden of Gethsemane, or the wine press, or the olive press, Okay? And there he set up the wood. He died on the tree. So the tree was on the Mount of Olives, the olives were on the Mount of Olives, and the wine was on the Mount of Olives. But notice the Mount of Olives is east of the Holy of Holies. It's on the Mount of Olives east of the city of Jerusalem. He set up an altar that was not part of the corrupt, abominable, sacrificial religious system by the sons of darkness who watched for the moon and using human eyes, human sensory to establish sacred time, sacred ritual, and sacred place. Whereas the Zadokites did not use their eyes and their ears. When it came to the Zadokites, they established sacred time, sacred ritual, and sacred place based on the revelation of the prophets and priests received from Yahuwah through the mediation of angels and recorded by the priests. That's the difference. Someone that really wants to know the times of Yahuwah will begin to learn you cannot use your eyes and your ears, because our eyes deceive us, our ears deceive us, and they get us in trouble. We think we heard, but we really didn't. That's not what was said. We thought we heard, but it was said differently. We thought we saw something. We look outside. There's a burglar. There's We look out, so we heard something, there's no one, and so now we're going to take those faulty, aging, deceptive, sensory perception, eyes, ears, and we're going to start looking for the moon. It don't work because the moon can't even be seen. Even if your eyesight and your ears were perfect, the moon cannot be seen for 2 weeks a year, so it doesn't rule anything. It doesn't rule the night. Matter of fact, it doesn't even know its borders. It's broken. Because half the month it shows up in the afternoon when the sun's supposed to rule. It's like a rebellious wife. The moon is like a rebellious wife who keeps showing up and doing things that her husband tells her not to do. So we need to change. We need to change. The way to know when Shabbat is and when the times of Yahweh is not to listen to me and then listen to other people and go, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, Moshe Konachowski says, hey. No, you don't use your eyes. True time cannot be determined with human eyes and human ears. It has to be by revelation, just like the authority of the tree, just like the authority of the Torah. All these things were given from heaven by revelation. But not private revelation or private prophecy, because no scripture is of any private interpretation. The calendar that I'm telling you is drawn up and preserved by angels and by the house of Aaron must be verified in Torah, and it is. It has to be found in the Torah, because no revelation deposited to men can be verified apart from Scripture. So month 6, days 23 to 28 are the Feast of Wood. As we said earlier, lasting 6 days, with a closing assembly on day 29. So apparently they would have the 6 days and then get together on Yom Echad after the Feast of Wood. We're not going to do that, but apparently that's what the Zadokites did. Each day, 2 tribes would bring a new wood offering in recognition that Yeshua's authority and atonement and his righteousness and his pardon for all of our sins was not just for one tribe or one house of Israel, which would be 3 tribes, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi in the south, but for all 12 tribes. So that's all 12 tribes returning to Yahweh, giving recognition for the love he showed to us from the wood. And we return the wood. He obeyed. Through his obedience, many are made righteous. We obey and return during the Feast of Wood and other appointed times for the same reason, because we love him. So we obey just like he obeyed. We bring the wood as a sign of our obedience. He brought the wood as a sign of his obedience to the Father. 6 days, 6,000 years of man, we live by the authority of the sacrifice from the wood outside the camp where Yeshua died on Golgotha. Golgotha is a fancy word that means the head. Rosh, in Hebrew, Rosh, the skull. Every mountain in Israel had the Rosh, the skull. There wasn't one place that, it looked like a skull. There it is. It's on top of the bus terminal. Oh, that looks like a skeleton. That must be Golgotha. No. Every mountain in Israel, every high mountain has Golgotha. Golgotha does not mean Golgotha. It means the head or the top, the peak. So Yeshua died on the Golgotha of the Mount of Olives. Now the Hebrew word Golgotha means every head counts. Okay, so all those who are going to the wooden sacrifice or the wooden altar outside the camp, every head counts, and they were required to appear at that altar and not at the corrupt altar in the temple. Because Yeshua himself, being a Zadokite, Melech Zadok, could not offer his atonement inside the temple courts because the Zadokite priests had been thrown out and voluntarily left and took their books with them, and we call that today the library at Qumran, because what was happening there was unclean at the wrong time. at the wrong place and with the wrong heart. So there was no way Yeshua could be the Melchizedekian priest and conduct the final atonement, exercising his rule and authority from the wood and putting the wood inside the temple courts. He had to establish the altar on the Mount of Olives, which is why he was arrested and taken at the foot of the Mount of Olives the night before, because that's where he was going to die. He was preparing the place of his execution. He began to bleed there to prepare the place of his execution. And that is a no-brainer, foregone conclusion. Anybody that has studied this out knows for a fact that Yeshua died on the Mount of Olives, which is where the first Nazarene Israelite community, they found their mikvah tanks and their other artifacts of their assembly. They met on the Mount of Olives. That's where they would meet. Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. Nehemiah 10:34. Let's read Nehemiah 10:34. If you're just joining us, we're in the middle of our unity service, our teaching. We already had our worship. Sister Mariamne is with her family and her grandmom in Texas, and so she'll be back with us for Spanish translations coming Shabbat by phone again. So Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. Nehemiah, and don't forget at 1:30, about 5 or 10 minutes after today's service concludes, we're going to go to Facebook. We're going to go to our timeline. You can just look me up under my name, Moshe Yosef Kanichowski. And we're going to be live, so you can prepare your questions and you can type it in, and we'll try to get to all your comments and questions as best we can. So that's immediately following. We'll have our Turtleside chat. Our Turtleside chat is now returning, and it's going to be live every week. We've discontinued the Uber conference for various reasons. The most importantly is I felt the leading of the Ruach to do that. Nehemiah 10:34. We cast lots among the Kohanim. Look, see who was performing the Feast of Woods? Watch. This is after the Jewish people returned from Babylon. We cast lots among the Kohanim and the Leviim, the Levites, and the people, for the wood offering to bring to the house of our Elohim, according to our tribes, meaning 2 per day, according to the house of our fathers. We're reading from Nehemiah 10:34. At the times appointed year by year, to burn upon the altar of Yahuwah our Elohim, as it is written in the Torah. So number one, Nehemiah bears witness that the celebration of the Feast of Wood is required in the Torah. Not in the Masoretic Torah, it's not. Most of you have a copy of the Stone Edition, or the Tanakh, or the Chumash. It ain't. There's nothing in there. There's nothing in the Torah that talks about a festival of wood. It's missing. How convenient. How convenient. The blood of Yeshua is missing. The Holy Spirit of Yeshua is missing. And the wooden sacrifice where he reigns authority over the redeemed, which is the citizenry of the coming kingdom, is also missing. And by the way, I didn't make my point fully. Even Passover has been removed by the Jews. Well, what do you mean? They celebrate Passover. Not really. Because if you look at a Passover plate, you'll see a shank bone. Instead of a lamb, instead of everybody eating the lamb, meaning killing the lamb and shedding the blood of the lamb, which would remind the average Jewish person of Messiah or Jesus, the Christian Jesus, supposedly, who bled at Pesach. To hide the bleeding Christian God, they think it's a Christian God. It's really our Mashiach, everybody's Mashiach. So they replaced the killing of the lamb and the eating of the lamb with a shank bone. They go to the supermarket, they buy a shank bone. It's got very little meat and no blood. So that's also hiding Yeshua. Well, who's doing all this? The same ones that are using their eyes to look for the moon. How many of you are still looking for the moon? Keep looking. Keep looking. Maybe you'll find Aaron Rodgers on the moon. Or maybe you'll find some cheeseheads on the moon. Now, I'm not making fun of you. I'm just trying to get your attention. There comes a time when we can't let men teach us anymore. We have to ask Yahuwah to deposit in us the same thing he deposited in Enoch, Elijah, Moses, and the house of Aaron, the sons of Kohath, who later biologically became the sons of Zadok. Obviously, they knew. Obviously. So it was revealed knowledge. How did Moshe know Yahuwah's name? Did he use the Jewish encyclopedia? Did he use the Encyclopedia Britannica? Did Moses send an email to Nehemiah Gordon to find out how to pronounce Yahuwah's name? Huh? Hello? No. He got it by revelation. Same with Shabbat. You're not going to know any of this stuff unless you ask the Father for the spirit of revelation to know what they knew, to deposit in you what was deposited in them. That's how they got to know it. So Nehemiah 10:34 says, we are to bring the wood offering according to our tribes, appointed year by year, meaning it's an annual requirement, as it is written in the Torah. Again, that reference, Nehemiah 10 and 34. Okay? Now, if we go to Leviticus 6:12, Vayikra 6:12, we read as follows. The obligation to burn the wood itself is in the Torah. We read. And here's another witness. We have Nehemiah, we have Nehemiah, but then he says it's in the Torah. Where? Right here. Write it down. Vayikra, Leviticus 6:12. The obligation to burn wood. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning on it. The fire on the altar will never be put out. And the Kohen will burn wood on the altar every morning throughout the year. He will then lay the burnt offering or the ascension offering, in Hebrew the olah. First he puts the wood, fresh wood. Then he puts the olah, which is mistranslated as burnt offering. It's actually the ascension offering. He puts the ascension offering on it, and he shall burn on it the fat of the peace offerings. So first we have the ascension offerings and the peace offerings are both dependent on the wood. So daily peace and daily atonement, or daily I shouldn't say atonement, but a daily offering and daily peace need the wood. So during those 6 days, Israel was to bring enough wood to last an entire year. I'll say that again. They were required to bring so much wood, each family of Israel, 2 by 2, just like the gospel, the message of the wood, the message of the authority of the wood, of Yahuwah who rules and reigns, Psalm 96 verse 10, from the wood. That's why Yeshua sent the message of the wood that had a sign on it, because the Jews require a sign, 1 Corinthians 1:22. The Jews require a sign. The Greeks require chokhmah. So Yahweh put a sign there. He don't care. The sign said, open for business. What business was that? The Father's business. It was a neon sign because Yeshua is the light of the world. So this Leviticus 6:12 annual requirement not only was a requirement in Torah, but it was required to bring enough wood to last for 365.25 mornings every year. And that's why the temple had storage rooms and storage rooms and storage rooms and storehouses. There were more rooms for storage than there was for sacrifice. The rooms and the places for the actual conducting of the ministry were small compared to the huge areas that were provided for storage and for bringing things into the treasury. First fruits, and in this case, the wood. Leviticus Vayikra 6:13. The fire shall always be burning on the altar. It shall never go out. Because Yeshua is the light, Yeshua rules from the wood. Both the light and the wood are eternal because Yeshua is eternal. That's why in Vayikra 6:13, Leviticus 6:13, the fire of the wood, meaning the authority, the power, the purity, the set-apartness, the holiness of the wood, can never go out because that was a picture or a prophecy or a type of Yeshua. Because Yeshua's power, his authority, the fact his authority and his light, it is a light that is never extinguished. So like Yahweh said, let there be light. So that's why there was light before there was a sun. Yeshua is light. So there's no way that Yahweh could allow the eternal flame to go out, because then it wouldn't be eternal. And it would be symbolic of Yeshua, the light of the world, also having the ability to extinguish itself and to one day have a different Savior or a different Redeemer, so that men would look to a different way of salvation rather than Yeshua, who is the eternal flame or the eternal light. And that's why in every Jewish synagogue, the so-called synagogue of Satan, now I'm not defending the rabbis. I'm the last person to defend the rabbis. Trust me. The rabbis don't want any part of me. I've had many debates with them. I've had many confrontations with them in New York. I've had many clashes with them in person, by mail, over the phone. They used to call my home and threaten to kill my children. All right, these people don't play nice. I understand all that. But that is not justification for broad brush, widespread ad hominem attacks. We should dislike them because they are anti-Yeshua missionaries, not because of their DNA fingerprint or the color of their skin or the practices of their ancestors. I pray you don't fall into that trap. And if you have fallen into that trap, that you get out of that trap. Have enough reverence. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. To admit and repent that too much of your believing life you have spent studying and analyzing and defending one race over the other. And more than likely it's your race. And come out of that. And be restored to Yahuwah. And now things will start going well for you. Now doors will start opening. Now you will no longer see men as trees, but as men. When he touches your eyes a second time. When Yeshua said, what do you see? He said, I see men blurry like trees. And Yeshua had to touch his eyes with the clay a second time. And you need to allow him to touch your eyes a second time. Because you know what I'm talking about. Some of you are listening in, you're just checking this out. You're spying us out here. I love you, Yeshua loves you, because to be a true servant of Yah, you have to love and be hospitable, and meaning receive spiritually and if necessary even physically. All men. Hispanics, non-Hispanics, brown, yellow, blue, black, white. So when you come to me and you say, Joseph's coat of many colors is colors. White is not a color. So in the rainbow, white is excluded. I know where you're coming from. I've dealt with you before, and I've dealt with your kind before. You may be fooling those who are spiritually retarded, but you're not fooling me. When you come to me and tell me that Israel is not Joseph's coat of many colors because white is not a color and white is not in the rainbow, okay, whatever games you're playing, then I know what kind of spirit I'm dealing with. You're not fooling me. So keep trying to fool other people. And make disciples after yourself, pulling them away from the Lamb based on bloodline theology and race-conscious faith. We're not called to be race-focused. We're called to have the mind of Yeshua, who was a lover of all men and a justifier of all men made righteous in him. Some of you are shouting, oh man, some of you are shouting, oh my, but I could care less. If you've been walking so focused on restoring your honor as a black man or as a white man or as a yellow man, and that's that dominates your thought process. If it's more important for you to preserve your heritage for your children, your culture, than it is for you to snap into immediate obedience to the things of Yahweh that he has revealed to you, O man, then it's very possible that you have fallen into the sin of race-based faith instead of Yeshua-based faith. Because if I'm busy looking up at my redemption as it draws nigh, I don't have time to focus all my life on preserving my white or Hispanic or black or Jewish heritage, when I'm supposed to preserve and teach and administer the authority that comes from the wood. And the authority that comes from the wood doesn't leave out one color or claim that white man ain't a color. You can take a kindergarten child and they'll understand what I'm talking about. But when you get hardened in heart, and when you get angered in your mind, and you're determined to enact retribution, then that's the spirit of Islam. Because Islam allows Jews and Christians to live if they pay the zizin, the tax. We can't have that attitude. We can't pay a tax. The white man can't repay the black man for injustices done, or vice versa. We need to move on to a new dawn, a new day, a new age, a new kingdom, and a new mindset. But you know, no matter how much you teach and preach this stuff, some people, they're not willing to change. They're not willing to make repentance. As a white man, I've had to take stock many times and check my heart and say, have I begun to get an attitude against people of color? Have I begun to look down on people of color or to begrudge them? I've had to check my heart many times because we all are subject to prejudice. But that doesn't mean we have to live in prejudice and become racist. And the worst kind of racist to me ain't the white racist or the black racist. It's the biblical racist. Because you're using scripture to justify your crap. And the thinking that you can't get rid of. That you ought to be able to get rid of through the power of the Ruach. Since you claim to have it. It's nothing wrong with being prejudiced. Because we have the altar of Yeshua and the authority of Yeshua to deal with it so that we become divorced from it and it's no longer part of who we are. But there needs to be a willingness to take inventory. I've had to catch myself many times because I begin to look down on other people. But it takes some kind of humility and boldness. First, humility to see that you have an issue, and then boldness to tackle it. You need both. People say, well, we only need to be humble. That's poppycock. A man or woman of Yahweh has to be both humble and bold. humbled to see it, and bold enough to change immediately. Vayikra 6:13. The fire shall always be burning on the altar, because it represents Yeshua. His purity, his holiness, it never runs out, never burns out, and it's never going to fade out. It shall never go out, because the wood and the light, we call that Esh Tamid. In every Jewish synagogue, even though they may hate Yeshua, even though they may be blind, in front of the Aron Kodesh, we have it right here. Even though we're not a synagogue, we're a community of believers in the new covenant. We have a light right there. It's an eternal flame. That light doesn't go out, see? And that's where the brazen altar in the outer court was kept lit, 365.25. And there had to be enough wood, and it was up to the tribes of Israel to provide, according to Torah, Leviticus 6, 12, and 13. So in order to have the wood arrive at the temple, you have to have the presentation of the wood during the Feast of Wood. Okay? And it requires 6 days because it was a lot of wood. Now people know technically it wasn't a Shabbat. For those 6 days, everybody can go to work. But in order to schlep tons and tons of wood in the ancient time, they basically had to take off from work and school and their normal business, don't you think? I mean, to carry all that wood at such a distance, even if it was 5 miles from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, only 5-6 miles. But to carry enough wood for 12 tribes to furnish the brazen altar so that the lamp of Yah, representing daily love and mercy and daily light and shalom, the fat represented the shalom. Okay. The sacrifice represented daily mercy. But the fat represented daily shalom. Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. So I don't see too many people going to work or going to school in order to obey that commandment. And it wasn't just the Levites and the Zadokites, it was all Israel. All Israel was required to participate. Even though they were not waiting at the altar or ministering at the altar, they were still required to participate. Let's go to Jubilees. Now, many of you don't have a background in Jubilees. We have that on the website. Please spend some hours checking it out. You'll be blessed and enlightened. There are more copies of Jubilees found in the exiled Zadokite community in the Judean wilderness at the time of Yeshua. The world falsely calls them the Essenes. They never called themselves the Essenes. That's what the archaeologists called them. They called themselves the priests of Israel. And the first rule of humility and liberty is a man or a woman has a right to define themselves. You don't have a right to define them. They have a right to define themselves. As much as we disagree with LBGT, if they define themselves as homosexual or lesbians, they have that right. Yahweh has the right to destroy their soul in hell also. But they have that right to define themselves. And they define themselves as the Kohanim of the exile. So the book of Jubilees was more copies of Jubilees were found than any other book. I believe the next closest were the book of Psalms. So the most fragments found in Qumran were Jubilees and Psalms. But I do believe there are several full manuscript copies of Jubilees, not just fragments. Now we have fragments from the Tanakh, we have fragments from the Torah, but I believe we had several complete copies that were not fragmented. And it was the book that was apparently relied on the most because the Qumran Zadokite priests in exile did not consider it apocrypha. They didn't even consider it community rules or Maaseh HaTorah. They considered it the little Torah. that was given to Moshe on Har Sinai, that was given to Moses on Mount Sinai. So they saw Jubilees as a synopsis, as a compressed, smaller Torah. So it was, to them, that's why they had so many copies that were found, because to them it was the Torah. Because Moses got it on the 16th day of the third month, which is Shavuot, by the way. It's the day after, or right around the time of Shavuot. We read in Yovlim, we have that in our bookstore also. Super, matter of fact, we just reordered 5 copies because we sold out. And so we just reordered some copies. So we have some on the way. Excellent. With the true names restored. Please make sure that if you don't have a true name edition, that you get your copy. From Jubilees, we go to the book of Sefer HaYoblim, the book of the Jubilees, chapter 21, verse 12. It says this: old wood, this is obviously talking about the Feast of Wood that we're celebrating today. Today is day 2 of the 6 days. And you can count it if you want. Like you can say Hayom Yom Sheni. Today is the 2nd day of the Moed of Eitzim, or the Feast of the Woods, the trees, the woods. It says, old wood that is cut down long ago should not be used at the altar to keep the eternal flame lit. Can't use old. Why? Because Yeshua's atonement is fresh morning by morning. New mercies I see. It's fresh. It speaks to every new day, every new month, every new year, every new generation, until he tarries and he returns, according to Psalm 96, verse 13. So the wood can't be old or stinky, because it has to, his reality, walking with him, knowing him, according to Jeremiah 31:31, verse through 34, where all Israel knows him intimately, okay? Cannot be symbolized by something that is old, passé, and stale, that doesn't work today. What worked then works today. The good news that saved and redeemed and forgave men and made a stairway to heaven continues to make the stairway to heaven. It's just as fresh today. The message is just as fresh and appropriate today as it was in any other day or in any other generation. You follow me? So the wood cannot be old wood cut down. And then it tells you why. Jubilees chapter 21, verse 13. Jubilees chapter 21, verse 13. Do not place old wood on my altar, for its aroma, meaning its freshness, symbolizing the relevancy and the freshness of the good news where Yahuwah rules from the wood. The aroma, the fresh, new wood has a fresh, like a refreshing scent. See? And Yahuwah wants that wood to be fresh upon the altar every morning. Okay? So old wood from 2, 3, 4 years left over, they had to get rid of that. They could only use wood that was brought for these 6 days for 1 whole year. Okay? So if they had wood in this temple storehouse from 4 or 5 years ago, they could not use it. They would have to get rid of it. It could not be used to keep the Ner Tamid lit, or the Eish Tamid. It could not be used. They had to get rid of it. Recycle it. Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. Do not place on my altar old wood, because the aroma, the smell, the fresh smell, has left it. Because there is no longer an aroma upon it as at first, as in the beginning. Okay? So, every little mitzvah Yahweh gives us, whether it's the big Torah or the little Torah, Now, if the Kohanim, the Zadokites, say that Jubilees is scripture, and they refer to it as Torah HaKatan, like Talit Katan, in Hebrew, a small Talit Katan. Or sometimes they just say for short, Katan. The Kohanim of Israel, the true Kohanim, called Yovlim, Sefer HaYovlim, Torah Katan, the little Torah. So to them, it was part of understanding Yahweh. And so we have the big Torah in Vayikra 6, 12, and 13. Then we have the little Torah, Yoblim, 21, 12, and 21, 13. And then we have the prophets, Nehemiah. Why Nehemiah? Because he was used to rebuild the temple. So he would know what was required in the Torah. He couldn't just rebuild the temple, him and Zerubbabel, after the return from Babylon. He had to follow the instructions. Okay? So they had to cut down fresh trees and offer it to Yahweh for 6 days that year. And if it didn't get used in that year, they couldn't use old wood. And they had to make sure that they offered enough not to run out. Because if they ran out, they couldn't go back and use old wood that was stored. It had to be relatively fresh and kept fresh. So they may have had some kind of system in certain storehouses or certain rooms, treasury rooms of the temple, where they had methods of keeping the wood fresh. Some of you may know how to do that. I'm a New York boy, I don't know anything about that. Okay, but obviously they knew that was part of their training and their obligations in their ministry. Let me just close with one final interesting story. About a week and a half ago, I think it was, we had a potential hurricane come through town, and it didn't do much damage. It was minor, kind of nothing, no big deal. But on our property, everything was safe. Well, two things that happened was one light plastic chair blew into the pool. And then one pine tree fell down. Just one. So we had some of the men of the community come, cut it up, and put it in the back of the property. It was not removed from the property. We were thinking of removing it, but it's still on the property. And then Yahweh showed me that wood is a first fruit offering, and maybe we could even somehow use it for our celebration on this Shabbat, the 6th day of the Feast of Wood. And that Yahweh did not destroy our property. He protected our property, praise Yah. He protected all the trees and all the things. But he allowed only one, as a first fruit, as a bikurim, to fall, to give us, to knock down and present to us a tree that we can use, or that apparently that he wanted used for our first celebration of the first fruits of the Feast of Woods. This is our first year celebrating the Feast of Wood, even though we've been celebrating the Leviticus 23 feasts for over 30 years. So he basically gave us the wood. It's fresh. Okay? It's less than a week. It's less than 10 days old. Okay? This is not stale wood. It hasn't lost its aroma or anything of the sort. This is the kind of wood that could be used in the altar of Yahweh for the eternal light, the eternal flame. So Yahweh gave us one pine tree that fell, an evergreen, as a first fruit offering to our set-apart community who were determined ahead of time. Even if that pine tree had not fallen, we were determined ahead of time to honor Yahuwah and restore this feast along with the other two missing feasts. And Yahuwah provided, because we know for sure, over and over again, he has proven himself to all of us that he is Yahuwah Yireh. He will provide. Now, here's what I want you to do. We're going to take a short 5-minute intermission. We're going to head over to Facebook, our timeline. Moshe Yosef Konichowski. And we will be on live as long as you guys are participating and commenting and asking questions, which means we could go on till 3. If we don't have participants or we see that people are not participating, we will cut it short. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to our ministry, it's been a blessing meeting with you. We'll see you this coming Shabbat, Wednesday at 12 p.m. for another live service from Goshen.